I think, for every JoeCon that I've ever been invited to, and I think that's about 18 of them. So we've been doing this routine. How many people are new? How many the first time hearing this? All right, good. So what I did was, this is a presentation that we normally do because it starts at the beginning and takes us through the whole early history of G.I. Joe and how Larry and I got to work together with each other in the early days. So some of it's going to be old news to some of you, but for those of you who this is the first time you're seeing the presentation, I think you'll get something really important out of it. In addition, there'll be plenty of time to ask questions and answers after, because I've kind of shortened the presentation a little bit. So I call it G.I. Joe in the trenches because this is going to give you some real down and dirty information. First of all, the Commander-in-Chief, the man most responsible for turning Hasbro into the company it is today, is this man, Stephen Hassenfeld. Stephen was the son of the original, or the grandson of the original founders of the Hassenfeld Toy Company. And Stephen was part of the original 12-inch G.I. Joe success. Well, he was also part of the original 12-inch Joe demise. He was the man who killed the line because he was in charge. And we had to convince him that G.I. Joe deserved to be brought back to life again. And he was a tough boss to convince. Bob Krupis is the man, the legend, the genius, I believe, in bringing back the 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe. Or bringing back G.I. Joe, but doing it as a 3 3/4-inch figure. Bob had been a toy buyer for many years, joined Hasbro as a marketing director. He became my boss, my mentor. He taught me everything I know about boys' toys marketing. The idea that started it all is the comic book. Without the comic book, G.I. Joe never would have gotten off the ground. And the reason for that was Stephen kept insisting that the only way he was going to bring G.I. Joe back was if we gave him a big idea, a way to tell the story. And the comic book was the way that told that story. The original 12-inch G.I. Joe was an inspiration for all of us working on the brand. I was 12 years old when G.I. Joe came out. And when I was 12-year-old boys still played with toys, at least for another year or two, before we get interested in girls and sports, okay? But I was playing with G.I. Joe in 1964. I remember buying my very first G.I. Joe, and the ad that you see here inspired all of us working on it. G.I. Joe, the hallmark of the 12-inch line was he was fully posable. We wanted to make 3 3/4-inch Joes as posable as possible. And the other thing is, if you saw the Netflix series, where I talk about the fact that it's an action figure, not a doll, okay? That's what we try to take our styling cues from. The fact that our G.I. Joe should be as posable as the 12-inch. This is an example of the very first trade ad that we introduced the 3 3/4-inch figure to our toy buyers. It was very top secret. This ad ran, I believe it ran in the spring of 1981, okay? Where we were starting to really develop G.I. Joe. This was something that Larry had been working on, a planned comic book series called Fury Force. And I'll let Larry interject a little bit here about what this was all about.
Well, Fury Force was son of Nick Fury and leading a special ops unit that was had a secret headquarters underneath the motor pool at the Chaplain's Assistant School at Fort Wadsworth in Staten Island. There really was a Chaplain's Assistant School at Fort Wadsworth at the time. I think they closed that down about 20 years ago. So I did about 10 characters and did a whole bunch of design stuff myself. And Marvel said, no one's ever going to be interested in this stuff. So it sat on the shelf until Hasbro came to Marvel. And I said, well, you know, I already have a lot of these characterizations and the locations, so why not, you know, pull it off the shelf and combine it all.
So what we wanted to do was bring G.I. Joe to life. We went to Stephen with the idea of bringing it to life, and when he bought into the idea of a comic book, Griffin McCall, I talk about them a lot because they were our strategic partners. They were more than just our advertising agency. They were our strategic partners. They made contact with Marvel Comics and presented our idea of G.I. Joe. And I guess Jim Shooter at the time probably called in Larry and said, hey, you got to see this. And so Larry and, was it Archie Goodwin, and who else was part of that early meeting?
I think it was for Marvel.
Yeah.
It was Jim Shooter, Archie Goodwin, Nelson Yamtov, who was the licensing liaison, and maybe Tom DeFalco.
Okay.
And but actually, you know, Jim Shooter had asked every contract writer at Marvel if they would do this book, and they all turned it down. And then he asked all the other writers, and they all turned it down. And then he asked all the editors and assistant editors and the kid that went out for coffee. They all turned it. He came down the line at the Marvel offices, and my office was the last office. And I said, yeah, I'll do it.
And we're glad he did, because Marvel Comics became our key ally. These are examples of, you know, Larry's sketches for what Fury Force would be, and they were, you can see some of the inspiration in Fury Force that eventually got turned into G.I. Joe. But he became our secret weapon, because it's one thing to have a comic book, and it's one thing to hire somebody to write the comic book. It's one thing to have plastic toys. You needed somebody to give those plastic toys a soul. And that's what Larry did. He gave every one of those G.I. Joe characters a soul. Every one of those characters has, to me anyway, when I would read the profiles, they were living, breathing, real people. And I'll let Larry talk a little bit about that.
Well, they all are real people. I've pretty much based all the characters on people I knew, just so that I could keep the personalities consistent. And it was my way of, I've always done that. You know, the thing is, if you just make up a character of whole cloth, you know, it just becomes, you know, a mannequin that's walking around doing choreography. You know, but if you base it on real personalities, then you've got all the flaws and the peccadillos, and it has a reality to it. And to me, you know, plots never meant anything. You know, it was all, plots are just a good framework to hang really good characters on. And so I concentrated on the characters first, and I found out that, you know, the characters write the story once you get the ball rolling.
What you see here is, these were the cover submissions. We had to, once we got the approval from Stephen to go ahead with G.I. Joe, and once we contracted with Marvel that you're going to be the company that's going to help us bring these stories to life, and once we worked with Larry to create the biographies of all our characters, we had to start presenting the line internally to our management team and externally, eventually, to toy buyers. Well, we needed a cover for the G.I. Joe comic book. Now, remember, the comic book is still months away from being written and developed. And these were the first two sketches for what the cover could look like that were sent to me. And one of the more important decisions I made was to pick a cover. I was asked, pick a cover, which one do you like? Obviously the one on the right was the cover I chose to go with. And that was what we showed in our early presentations to toy buyers to get them jazzed about the G.I. Joe reintroduction. And you can see how the cover morphed into what you eventually bought on the newsstands. The copy on the image on the left is a marker comp that I have in my possession, and the image on the right is what the actual comic book is. This is the actual agreement between Marvel Comics and Hasbro joining forces. Tom DeFalco was assigned to be the editor, and he put Larry to work creating the biographies. Larry would go on to work with us every single year to create the characters, the bios for all our characters. We would meet with Larry on a regular basis, show him our new characters, show him our new vehicles, say, hey, here's who the characters are, here are the vehicles. We gave him a calendar. This is how diabolical we were, okay? We gave him a calendar that said, this is when we're going to ship these vehicles. This is the month we expect to ship this particular vehicle. This is when these characters will be available at retail. And Larry, I'll let you talk about how you integrated all that into the book.
Well, if I knew that a vehicle was coming out in June, I made sure that it was in the June issue of the comic.
Right.
You know, if new characters, if new figures were coming out, I made sure that they coincided. You know, it was a very cooperative effort. That combined with the fact that we got an incredible amount of mail from the kids, and I made it a point to read every single letter. And Marvel printed up a big stack of postcards with Hawk and Scarlet and Snake Eyes on it, and a blank balloon. So I tried to answer as many letters as I could every week. And I've been to conventions where people have come up to me and shown me the postcard I sent them when they were like 10 years old.
It's amazing.
And they kept it. But you know, reading the feedback was really important. You know, that, you know, if you're getting 200 letters a week and you don't read them, then you're really stupid.
Yeah, because contained in those letters are nuggets of information that you could use. I mean, I made it a practice at Hasbro. This is before the days of email, okay? I would visit our consumer services department on a weekly basis and visit with the woman who ran it and say, what are the complaints we're getting? Or what are the comments that we're getting from consumers? And I would read them and look in those letters for flaws in our product that we would then change or could possibly change.
I would pass along all that stuff. I remember when the first issue came out, I got 100 letters from kids written in crayon, you know, and stuff that said, you know, the vamp, there's this machine gun muzzle like right on the hood, and it's situated in such a place that where the breech would have to be sticking out of the driver's back, you know, and it flashed on me my own memories as a kid looking at toys and going, oh no, that wouldn't work. It doesn't, you know, it sort of destroys my immersion in fantasy if something is wrong with it.
So Larry or someone at Marvel would literally send a lot of these letters to us for me to read and share with and I still have them. I still have a box filled with maybe 200 fan letters from back in the day that, you know, I would read and pass on to the designers and the engineers and say, we've got to figure out a way to fix this. If anyone wants to know what Larry's original file cards look like, they weren't what are on the back of the packages, okay? They were this. This is what I would get from Larry at the start of every year, and they were very extensive file cards with lots of information on them, and naturally we couldn't put all of this on the back of a little file card, so my job, and I took this as, you know, like a great honor, my job was I got to edit Larry Hama. And so this is some of the early bios for, I think it's Grunt is up there.
Yeah, I originally did these just for myself, And I think it was either you or Bob came by the office and saw them on my desk and said, hey, maybe we should put these on the back of the package. And this hadn't been done before, so this was, right?
Yeah, this was brand new stuff.
This was
brand new territory.
the first time, and then it's become sort of like industry standard.
Yeah.
You can't really have an action figure without some sort of bio on the back.
Plus, we didn't have at the time, I mean, we were competing with the biggest toy license of ever, Star Wars. It had come out in 1978, shipped product in 1979, 1980. They had a movie. They had, at the time, a $20 million movie, and the next one was a $30 million movie. And how do you compete with that? How's a comic book going to compete with that? And we did, because we did something else. We took the comic book idea and advertised it. It's the first time a comic book had ever been advertised on television. Now, I'm sure that went a long way in helping Mike Hobson and Jim Shooter make the decision to go forward with the G.I. Joe comic book. Because we promised to advertise 4 times a year for $1 million a G.I. Joe comic book. And that became a certain formula that got kids excited, because that 30-second comic book ad created an awful lot of awareness, but even more, a lot more excitement for the G.I. Joe toy line. And then we were able to chop that commercial up into 7-second animated clips that we would use at the beginning of the commercial to capture your attention for the toys.
And historically, it had a bigger impact than just on G.I. Joe, because I've had hundreds of people come to me at cons and say, well, yeah, I would have never gone into a comic book shop if I hadn't seen the commercial for G.I. Joe. So I went to the comic book shop to get G.I. Joe, and I got, that was my gateway drug. Got me hooked on the X-Men and Fantastic Four, Batman, and everything else. So, it's hard to judge how big the impact of just those 4 commercials were.
At Hasbro, while Larry was developing those bios, we were busy, creating the G.I. Joe characters. These are some of the initial sketches that Ron Rudak did for the first 1982 line of characters. So you see me at the top, I became Grunt. The man in the beard in the center there is Wayne Luther, one of our key G.I. Joe designers. The sketch to the middle page on the left is Jim Totley. Jim was a sculptor at Hasbro. He sculpted the entire 1982 and 1983 product line. Unfortunately, Jim was a Vietnam vet, and he had had a lot of stress in Vietnam. He passed away at a very young age of about 42 of a heart attack. We came to work one day and we were stunned to hear that, and it was just a tragic loss for us. The man in the lower right there, that's the side view of Ron Rudak, who, he drew himself, but he never became part of the first year line. He eventually became Leatherneck, yeah. But Ron was constantly sketching. This is the first design idea for the G.I. Joe figure by Ron. Looks a lot different than what the original 1982 line characters really look like. The characters on the left, you can see a totally different helmet. Very futuristic. We were always pushing the idea that G.I. Joe was the military, not of today, but of tomorrow, the near future, 5 to 10 years out. That character sketch on the right there is what eventually became a Grunt, and what we did is that's how we would call out to our factories the paint operations that we would want to have the character decorated with. Here's our first version of Snake Eyes. You can notice that he wasn't called Snake Eyes. He was simply called Commando. And Ron designed him around the idea of the British SAS. And when we turn that sketch over to Larry, Larry took one look at it, and, well, why don't you tell the story?
Well, you know, not much to tell.
Well, I mean, my point is, you looked at that, and that Commando became Snake Eyes.
Well, you know, since he's totally covered, I think, well, this is a gateway to multiple fantasies that, you know, any kid could imagine themselves as Snake Eyes.
And I think that's an important point.
That's an important point.
That's a real important point, and that may be why Snake Eyes is as popular as he is. Because you don't see who he is, he's a man of mystery, and I think kids could identify with him a whole lot more, that yes, I can be Snake Eyes. And I think he's also, if I were to put it into other terms, for me, he's the superhero in the line, the secret identity kind of character.
Well, you know, and he also has disabilities and issues,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that's an important fantasy relation aspect also.
And that's the design of Cobra Commander that Ron gave early sketches to. The other interesting thing to note is that as much as you guys collect G.I. Joe figures, G.I. Joe was never supposed to be an action figure line. It was supposed to be an action vehicle line with figures as accessories. And it morphed into becoming an action figure line. So these are some of the early designs of the Dragonfly and the Sky Striker. And Wayne Luther is a designer supreme. These are some of his sketches. I still have a bunch of these at home that I love looking at his design sketches. They're just very dynamic, very detail-oriented, and to me, they're works of art. This is the early G.I. Joe team. There's myself as the product manager on the line. Greg Bernstein in the middle and Ron Rudat. We've stayed pretty much lifelong friends, having worked on this line for so many years together. Here's some more original figure designs. Duke, Bubba, who became Roadblock. That figure in blue on the left is the very first concept design for Cobra Commander. And you can see he was supposed to have his face exposed. He was going to have like a silver chrome helmet. But that is the very first, Ron's very first impression of what Cobra Commander would look like. There's Gung Ho. And then a whole section of G.I. Joe Babes. On the left is Scarlet, Ron's early interpretation of Scarlet, and then his actual rendering of what Scarlet would look like. I also put a warning up here that this section of the presentation is not politically correct. So remember the times, okay? 1982, 1983. There's CoverGirl and the Baroness. These were early presentation sketches that Ron created. He used a lot of watercolors, a lot of acrylics as his medium of choice. Here's what we really wanted the Baroness to look like. That was what Ron would do at lunch. He'd sketch those kind of, I'd go by his desk every afternoon around 12:30 just to see what he had sketched. This is a model sheet for Zorana from the G.I. Joe movie. We needed a PG-13 rating, and there's two ways at that time of getting a PG-13 rating. You could show nudity, or you could swear. We chose to go with swear. But she was supposed to come out of a swamp, and you would never see the front of her, but she was supposed to come out of the swamp, and you'd see the back of her coming out of the swamp like that. And to get, the model designer had to give her a front as well.
This is Russ Heath drawing. Russ Heath drew Sergeant Rock for DC Comics for years, and one of the best military artists that was ever in the business. And he drew one issue of G.I. Joe.
Yes, he did. That's one of my favorite issues. I'm a big Russ fan. fan. And then you've got this model sheet which he drew that, you know, is crazy. Massive firepower. Part of the G.I. Joe experience was, or what helped to send it over the top, were the daily animated adventures. The first 2 years, in '83 and '84, they were 5-part miniseries that we syndicated to stations around the country. And then based on the popularity of those 10 episodes, we went ahead and created the daily adventures of G.I. Joe. And that obviously catapulted the G.I. Joe success into the stratosphere. Tactics that we developed, you can't really see it up top, but that's some notes from one of my notebooks. One of the things we did, Bob and I, is that this is, again, before the days of computers and before the days of retailers giving you computerized printouts at point of sale. We would literally go to the toy stores in our area, Toys R Us, Child World, and we would physically count inventory on a weekly basis. So we would see what characters were moving, what characters were selling, and if we saw characters sticking, you know, to the shelf, we would contact the Orient right away and say, hey, we need to reduce the number of short fuses and increase the number of snake eyes. So that's my analysis that I found in an old notebook that I just threw up here, where I have a physical count of what characters were on the shelf and what weren't. In the middle is a field test where our quality control people would send product out and we would get analysis back. How durable was the toy? Did the child enjoy playing with it? So I would look at that and read that and say, hey, you know, we're getting a lot of complaints of thumbs breaking, okay? We better think about doing something about those thumbs breaking, so it encouraged us to change the material.
And missiles going missing.
And then another detail is the Free Cobra Commander. That became part of our flag point redemption program, where you collected so many flag points, sent them in, and we'd send you a Free Cobra Commander for 50 cents. That Free Cobra Commander, we redeemed 175,000 year one. Eventually, over the course of 4 years, I believe we redeemed close to 500,000 Cobra Commanders. That's how popular G.I. Joe was, and it led to the creation of Hasbro Direct, which was the direct mail business that we ran, selling leftover merchandise to all of you, which was a business that I grew from 0 to $15 million in 2 years. Yay for me. A letter. Larry talked about letters, fan letters. I got a letter one day because we'd been doing all these flag points, and we never gave any offers because we were too busy creating the line. Well, if G.I. Joe went on sale, I think in early March of 1982, this letter came to me maybe in May or June, and it was a little kid who had collected like 15 flag points and he said, what do I do with all these? And so Bob and I got together and said, hey, you know, we forgot about creating something that we should get kids to redeem. And he went in the back. Ron had been developing Cobra Commander to go into our regular second wave of figures. We pulled Cobra Commander out and said, the only way you're going to get him now is by sending away for him. And that's how we solved that problem.
Great way to sell more vehicles.
Promotional firepower were, you know, you saw in the live action commercials, you saw the using Sergeant Slaughter and Bridge Perry, but we had a lot of other promotions. Some of you might remember mini comic books that Marvel, you know, created for us, tattoos, rings, you know, little plastic rings, camo face paint. I mean, every first quarter of every year, we tried to generate some kind of promotion to really give a spike in sales in that first quarter, because that got the retailers in a good mood. Oh, G.I. Joe, we thought it was going to die off. Oh, I'm seeing a big spike in sales first quarter once again. So that became part of our hallmark. Because you got to understand, in the toy business, if you get 3 years out of an action figure line, you're doing great. Most action figures lines die after 1 year. To have a G.I. Joe brand be around since 1982, on and off, okay, that's a phenomenal story to tell. And it takes a lot of hard work.
It was pretty much the limit for almost anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, well, You know, no toy company wanted to be stuck with warehouses full of Cabbage Patch dolls ever again.
And that brings up another point, because I hear people talking about G.I. Joe saying, G.I. Joe died for me when they did Neon Colors, and G.I. Joe died for me when they did Star Brigade. Well, you gotta understand, you're looking at that maybe through the lens of a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old. Think about looking at G.I. Joe from the lens of a 5-year-old. And I try to think of the toy business, we think of generations happening every 20 years. There's a new generation. In the toy business, there's a new generation almost every year. But in terms of action figures, how long, go back in your memory banks right now and think about how long did you actively play with G.I. Joe? You probably got into G.I. Joe as an 8-year-old, because we had statistics that told us G.I. Joe was the oldest action figure line, okay? So you probably started playing with G.I. Joe when you were 8, and guaranteed by the time you were 11, maybe 12, you weren't playing with G.I. Joe anymore. You had moved on to other things. So now a whole new generation comes around. How do you capture that new generation? You can't keep doing the same thing. And so that's why we did Manimals, and that's why we did Star Brigade, and that's why we did replicators that some of you saw in presentations yesterday. And that's why we did Sergeant Savage, okay? Because you have to change. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. So that's just a little justification for how you have to keep the brand moving and evolving. Larry alluded to it. We wrote the book on how to market action figures. When I go back and think about all the things we pioneered as a team at Hasbro, these are the things we pioneered. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see some of the things. We did things that people don't do anymore. Cross-sell books that were packed into toys. All those little mini catalogs. I had people come up to me yesterday in the line and they wanted me to autograph them. Because they said, man, when I got a new G.I. Joe toy and got this catalog in them, that got me excited for the rest of the year. Eventually I think we even tried to put the dates of when the product would be available at retail to really get you into the G.I. Joe concept. And then, as you look through here, you see some of the things we did, including creating collector conventions. We're the first branded collector convention. Okay? James D. Simone in California in 1990. So, that's what we did. Of course, I can't conclude the presentation without showing you my favorite G.I. Joe. And I'll be signing him today, this afternoon, and you buy them. But let's think for a minute about what this is really all about. Please, let's thank the real G.I. Joes.
Hoorah.
Hoorah. Okay, so I finished about the time I wanted to finish, and Larry got to eat a little bit of lunch, and now we're going to sit here and we're going to answer questions.
Well, that was quick. Yes, sir.
All right, so this is for Kirk, and I always had a question in my head I keep forgetting to ask you when I talk to you. So back in 1990, about when you got back on the line,
Yes.
so obviously we had the introduction in 1990 of the Overlord character. And they had the anime commercial, or the commercials where Sergeant Slaughter was interacting with the animated Overlord. But the character never made an appearance in the comic, and never made an appearance even in the deep cartoon that was going on at the time. Is there a story behind why that happened?
Not really. Larry didn't like them. No, it's as simple as that. Seriously, it's as simple as that. Larry was probably involved in some story arc that we couldn't fit him in. And there was no reason to have him in the animation because we were really slowing down on the animation at that time, if not having eliminated the animation by then.
Yeah, and there's so many characters, it's difficult enough rotating the really popular ones in and out, if you introduce a new character, you had to do it with a lot of, gusto. And if people's first reaction isn't good, then, you know, that all goes back to, you know, the letters. You know, if kids wrote in and said, I don't like this, you know, I made sure it was gone next issue. If they said, hey, I really like this, I made sure there was twice as much of it in the next issue. And it really pays to keep track of, you know, what your audience is actually, what your audience actually wants. You know, instead of trying to force something on them that, you know, it's never going to stick.
Rod, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I got the mic. Just wanted to make sure you knew where I was. So I had a question for you, Kirk. As a matter of fact, one of the last slides had a list of the different things that you pioneered, that you know came up with. Well, you meaning the team, of course. As you know, I grew up overseas, and one thing I noticed on that list that I hadn't noticed before was the Real American Hero contests, which was towards the bottom of the list. What were those? I don't remember hearing about that, and just
Okay,
curious.
well, that was, the Real American Hero Contest was a school program, started in 1982, and ran, I believe, well, DEF, I guess, so it ran all the way through until 1994. It was a school curriculum program put together by a company called Lifetime Learning Systems, who would meet with us, and we would give them direction each year on how to create packets of information for schools. You had to soften the edge of G.I. Joe, right? Military toy, how do you soften it? Well, we did what we call today societal marketing. We tried to do back then. So early on, we created, write an essay on a real American hero. And it went out to grammar schools, junior highs, all around the country. And at the end of the year, an independent company would judge the 5 best essays, and students would win a $10,000 college scholarship. So that's, and it obviously wouldn't have occurred to you, you know, or you wouldn't have seen that.
Thank you.
Okay.
This question is for Larry. With IDW picking up G.I. Joe comics from Marvel 155 and now, y'all started a really nice hardback collection of the Marvel run. It ended on issue 8. I mean, you know, and I've been waiting for 9 in my Amazon queue for the past 2 years. Are they going to ever bring that back out, or is that just completely canceled?
I think they've gotten a lot of it already done. There was, my information was that there was somebody whoever was working on it had a major death in the family or something happened that, like, you know, threw it off track. But you know, if there's a whole bunch of it done, it'll eventually make its way out.
Right up front. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark?
Yeah, I always wanted to learn about the decision when a lot of shows were filmed. I saw like it's a big deal for a brand to knock off a bunch of beloved characters in a pretty brutal fashion. So I was always interested in how that developed. Did that come from Hasbro, or was that a push from Larry and from Marvel to freshen up the roster a little bit?
I think that was my idea. Well, you know, the thing was, I never really watched the animated series. But, you know, the only thing I knew about it was that nobody died. You know? And you know, if a plane got shot down, you always saw the parachute. You know? And
Network standards.
yeah, I know, but you know, my personal feeling was that, you know, I'm doing a military comic for kids, and you know, to not have to show the realistic impact of what it is, what combat is, was a disservice, and morally ambiguous. So that's, I said, look, you know, you have to have to show these aspects, or else you're just whitewashing it all, you know. And I didn't believe in that.
And I think that's what added to the gritty realism of the G.I. Joe comic book. And I think another reason was, and Larry will take some, we'll call it blame for having done it, right? But one of the frustrations that I was having coming back on the brand was we had so many characters. And Larry's probably saying to himself, I don't remember Kirk at the time. But we had so many characters that I was trying to focus on our core characters as well. Like, why did we have to keep doing a new sergeant when we already had our best sergeant, Duke?
I kept bringing that up at the meetings, that like, you know, why do a completely new character that replicates an MOS that we already have? You know, why do we need more, you know, this specialist or that specialist? You know, why not do a brand new version of the existing character?
And that finally started to sink in here around '93.
I just had a quick comment. You said that a lot of kids stopped playing with Joes at a certain age. I'm just curious to know who was like me and kept playing with Joes even though you were starting to get interested in Joes. I mean girls. And
you know, the thing is it's not just about playing. You know, like at some point with kids, the collective impulse kicks in. Because I remember, you know, when I was writing the Marvel run, there was this 10-year-old kid who lived across the street, you know, and we knew their parents, and one day the mother says, you know, Chris really loves G.I. Joe. He's got this huge collection, you know, and he'd like to show you his collection, you know. And so the kid brings in this box, and he's got these like bubble wrap cocoons with rubber bands around them, and he's got these, remember those guns that
girls that would even talk to me. If they come over to my house, I would show them my room with all my Joes. If they didn't run away screaming, I knew they were okay. And I'm happily married now. But,
well, you know,
I loved everything y'all did.
the surprising thing that I found was that a pretty good percentage of the mail came from girls, you know. And I was interviewed by a journalist named Susan Faludi once, and about something else entirely. She mentioned, oh, you know, I really liked G.I. Joe when I was a little girl. And I said, well, what got you started? How did you get into G.I. Joe? And she said, well, I have 5 brothers. And, you know, in a household, you know, stuff that comes in gets played with or read by all the kids, you know. And so she read all her brother's comics and played with their toys, you know. I took, you know, G.I. Joes and made them play with Barbie, you know. And then I said, yeah, but like, why did you keep reading the comic? And she said, well, you know, it was the first like action comic that I read where the girls weren't treated, you know, like fragile objects, and the girls in G.I. Joe were treated just like guys, you know. And she liked that positive attitude, and I heard that from a lot of girls.
And so, oh, sorry. We'll get you next.
So this is my first and last Joe convention, so it's kind of bittersweet for me.
Bittersweet.
It took too long to get to one of these, but I guess it's good in some ways that the 3 3/4 line's ending, because I've got closets full of toys, and my wife's the one who uses those closets for kids' toys. So my question is for you guys. Did you guys have, and maybe this is another panel, do you have a creative process in when they kind of relaunched the 3 3/4 line? I don't know if it was like 2011 or 12. But you've gone back and kind of recollected all the toys that I had when I was a kid in the 3 3/4 line and remade them these last like 7 or 8 years, and I've kind of rebuilt my whole G.I. Joe collection out of what I had when I was a kid. And I know that's now kind of away, but I didn't know if you guys were involved in that process at all, or if that's been totally different.
No, I'm not involved in that process.
Okay.
Larry was involved in the relaunch.
What?
In the relaunch, when we relaunched it in
Yeah.
2001, we
Yeah.
brought Larry back on board to basically do the same comic narrative. That was very important to have,
Yeah.
the father of the character
Yeah.
carry that as well. So at the beginning of that whole thing, when it came back,
This is Daryl DePriest, by the way.
So you had mentioned the female Joes, and I get why Scarlett has her name, I get why Cumberland has her name. Where did the name Lady J come from? Because her file name did not even have a J in it.
That's a sort of convoluted story. You want to explain about Griffin and McCall?
No.
Well, basically, Griffin and McCall, that we explained about was the advertising agency, and the McCall was Jay McCall, and his wife was called Lady J. So that's where it came from. It's
As simple as that.
Hey guys, real quick, can you talk about Rocky and how quick he did and did not exist?
Well, we were doing, I can handle that one. When we were doing the live action characters, Sergeant Slaughter and Fridge Perry, Fridge was an outgrowth of Rocky, because Rocky, who we were gonna do, did us a little dirty deed. We were hours away from signing a licensing agreement with Sylvester Stallone when his agent informed us that he had just done a licensing deal with Coleco. And, that was a no-no. So we pulled the license and turned the Rocky character into Big Boa, the Cobra trainer. It's that simple.
My question is, for either one or both, was there anything that you saw created or designed that you really wanted made into a figure or a vehicle and it never happened?
Okay, if Larry can think of one, he can feel that. Mine, we had an idea that came in from an inventor. Hasbro was very averse to doing inventor ideas in G.I. Joe for many years. Eventually, we started doing them. But we had an inventor idea come to us from the UK, which was Cobra Island. And the Cobra Island was a large play set. It would have been 2 or 3 times the size of the Cobra Terradome. But it was a giant volcanic island with all kinds of, so out of the top of the volcano would come a helicopter, but a spinning, launching helicopter, right? So it had all these crazy play features, lights, sound, etc. We just could never cost it out. We had so many features. And even trying to cost reduce it down, turned it into, a nothing play set that we just gave up on. That would have been the one item that would have been really cool.
That problem could have been solved by modularity. I mean, in Japan, Dr. Slump, who was the progenitor of Dragon Ball, they came out with model kits, because Dr. Slump lived on this island, right? And all these characters had distinctive houses and things. So they came out with little kits of the characters with their little houses, 20 kits, but they made them interlock. So that if you got all 20 and fitted them all together, you got the whole island. It's like,
Can you talk about the PSAs and the tune? Why were they in the cartoon? And then who came up with the slogan? Now you know.
Joe McCall, Griffin McCall, would probably take credit for it. But he was he was the producer of everything. He probably had obviously had writers writing that, but he would have been the one to say we need to do that. And the reason we need to do that was to once again soften the military aspect of G.I. Joe. You gotta understand, moms were still highly indignant that their children wanted to play with G.I. Joe. And so we had to do whatever we could to, quote, soften what G.I. Joe was, which is why people never died in the TV show. Why parachutes always came out of the air when a jet was shot down. So those PSAs kind of softened what we were doing in the show. And they provided some really solid information for young kids, positive values and things that they should know. We got a question right down here in the front, but he's here, so you got to just talk louder.
So, you know, we've been talking about a lot of the stuff that happened in the past, but currently, Larry monthly is giving us great stories through IDW in the G.I. Joe Real American Hero. So I was just curious if there was anything you could share about, I mean, there's been big things happening. There's a new Snake Eyes running around with brand new adventures. Is there anything you can just talk about with the Dawn character? Any kind of behind the scenes stuff? How that happened, or and as well from the Hasbro end, you know, I know we're waiting on Hasbro and Paramount to give us these new cinematic adventures, but with a brand new Snake Eyes, has there been any talks about giving us just a single figure between now and 2020 of this Don Marino character?
Well, I mean, the reason I came up with Dawn was that I needed a vehicle to tell more Snake Eyes stories, you know, and to have, you know, his memories implanted in her meant that he would not have a voice. You know, I mean, that was the impossible thing about it. You couldn't do these flashbacks because he, you know, I couldn't put him into words. You know, it would have to be pantomime flashbacks. But, you know, a person that can speak, who has those memories implanted, can relate those stories, and we can get, you know, the untold Snake Eyes stories. What I've been doing lately is trying to like fill in gaps, you know, in history by doing sort of the untold stories of certain characters. I just did that with Stalker and so on and so forth. You know, the reason, you know, I came up with Dawn and designed her, you know, from the ground up was that, you know, I go to a lot of cons, I talk to a lot of cosplayers, you know, and all the girls said to me, you know, there's not enough good girl characters with costumes that we like. You know, there's the Baroness and there's Scarlet, and like, that's it. You know, I mean, Lady J is just fatigues. Why aren't there more, you know, female characters with, you know, really cool costumes? So, you know, and already I see cosplayers out there, you know, and she's become really popular. You know, stuff like that, you know, leads, you know, it all leads to other things, you know, and you have to like stir up the pot, and so you got to, you can't, like Kirk said, you can't keep doing the same thing, you know, and, you know, the change is good. And, you know, just because Snake Eyes died in continuity doesn't mean that you can't have more Snake Eyes stories.
We've got one more question in the back, so we'll get a wrap up.
Have you ever thought of making like remote control vehicles for the toy?
Well, we did do a remote control vehicle, the Crossfire, many years ago. You're gonna have to look for it out on the sales floor. And it's not gonna be cheap. But I spent 2 weeks in Japan with the designer, and we literally took a pad of paper with us and met with Nico, the premier RC toy company at the time, and they'd show us designs, and the designer would design sketches, and he'd say, Kirk, how does this look? And I'd say, yeah, that looks great, or no, and we'd put out the Crossfire. I think we have to wrap up because we have my friends Dave Kunitz and Kirk Rome coming on next. So we're sorry we ran over into your time, but